Hitting revenue targets is hard and requires constant hustle. Last quarter's success is already forgotten. Learn the mindset and tactics of today's most successful revenue producers in B2B marketing and sales. We call this the revenue hustle. I'm your host, Tom Hessen, navigating you on this journey. Today's show is sponsored by 9 Lenses, an interactive assessment platform that enables you to add instant value to your buyers and allows your sales team to tailor business conversations focused on the pain points each and every time. Check them out at 9lenses.com.
Well, hello, my name's Tom Hessen. I am the host of the Revenue Hustle podcast, and I have the distinct pleasure of having Margaret Irons, the VP of Marketing and Communications at 3Pillar Global, with me today. Welcome to the show, Margaret.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I know we've had the opportunity to kind of get to know each other over the past year, as 9 Lenses has been working with you and your team at 3Pillar. So this is going to be a fun conversation. But let me just start and just give you, the audience a quick intro to Margaret, and I'll let you introduce yourself. But as you know, the VP of Marketing of 3Pillar, I'll let you describe all that entails. But 3Pillar is a global digital product development services company. So I think that they build really cool digital products. But welcome to the show, Margaret. I'll let you do give your side of the intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's great to see you as always. Yes, I'm Margaret Irons. I'm the VP of Marketing Communications at 3Pillar Global. We do digital product development services, as you said, which really means that we help create products for our clients, mainly in the information services space, that are customer facing and revenue generating for our clients. So we say we touch our customer's customer, and work with big brands like Fortune and PBS and others in the media, retail, and information services and technology spaces. So really sort of information rich industries.
Fantastic. And how long have you been there?
I have been at 3Pillar for almost 3 years.
Okay.
So enough time.
You're a seasoned vet.
I'm a seasoned 3Pillar vet. That's exactly
okay. Well, fantastic. Well, we're just going to jump right in today's episode. And as we started in the past couple of episodes, we've been introducing this concept of revenue rules. These are concepts and ideas that our guests hold near and dear to their heart about what it takes to drive revenue inside of a business. So, Margaret, what is your revenue rule?
So I have a couple revenue rules, but my biggest revenue rule is that marketing and sales have to have no daylight between them when creating successful campaigns. And that means, collaboration, alignment, goal setting, etc. must be in sync.
That sounds like a hard lesson that you probably have learned along the way. That's not a I don't think I've heard co-creating campaigns with sales as something that commonly flows out of the mouth of a marketer. So how did you come to this rule?
So it's interesting. The old world of marketing is, you do a bunch of stuff, build a bunch of brands, do a bunch of stuff, and then the leads come in, and then you sort of throw them over the wall, and the sales picks them up and runs them down to the finish line, right? And increasingly, we're seeing that customers are not raising their hands soon enough, right? So by the time that you actually have a conversation with someone, they're way far down in the process of their own buying. So they've already made an opinion about you. They've already made, an idea of what you are and how you'd work with them without you even talking to them. So the alignment in marketing and sales really has to happen before the person makes that decision. And how do you find them? It's really hard, particularly when you're looking in a B2B services space, which we are. Finding titles, finding people, buying committees are huge. It's just a really complicated sale. And when I found that we have been most successful is when we sit down with our sales counterparts and we talk about their goals, what they're hearing in the market, how their customers, their clients, their prospects are talking about the problems that they're facing, and that we surround ourselves with those issues and really focus on how do we extract the theme or the thread from what they're hearing and build our marketing to complement that so that it's really in sync and in line with what what conversations they're having in the marketplace.
Now,
So
do you think, sorry, go ahead.
okay.
I was going to say, do you think that that's a part of the issue with, or the solution that you're solving is partly that marketing doesn't talk to as many people in the marketplace? Obviously, sales is talking to people every single day. I've certainly have been reading on LinkedIn over the past few weeks and months just about how marketing needs to get on sales calls. Is that part of the problem, that marketing is just not quite as close to the customer as maybe they should be?
I totally. And it's funny, I actually just asked if I could get on a sales call next week because there's certain things, rhythms, consistencies that you start to see the more that you participate in the sales process that I think are innate in a sales culture, right? They're innate in a salesperson that that don't necessarily stand out. Certain words that are used for certain audiences, ways that questions are asked by the prospects. That can be really telling and indicative of what the experience of our potential client is and how we should talk to them and what resources we should bring to bear to convince them that we are the right solution for their problem or we can help them achieve their goals. So this integration, right? And marketing and sales are natural frenemies, right? We all have the same goal. We all want the revenue. We all want the company to grow. We all want to get bigger. But there's a natural push there. There's a natural conflict there that I think is important. But increasingly, as we see the sales cycle get more complex and the challenges that our customers are experiencing, we just can't be out of sync. And when we are, what we're doing on the marketing side to build brand isn't working as strongly. What we're, the materials and the resources that we're bringing to bear aren't as useful, right? And that can be really challenging for the team itself, right? Why are we're spending all this time and effort? What are we getting for it? And so the alignment with the sales team is really important in creating that uniform set of goals and that North Star. My team always hears me talk about the North Star. Where are we pointing? What is guiding our way?
Right.
And so if we can align with our sales counterparts in that, then in my view, we're virtually unstoppable.
Yeah, no, I think alignment, when you're rowing in the same direction, you obviously get there faster. So I got to ask, what was the reaction to your request to be on the sales call? Was it a, huh?
They were I said, it's been a long time since I participated in a sales call. I'd love to do that. And they're like, well, sure, I guess you can. It was sort of a surprise. Like, why would you want to? Why would you bother? But I think, like I said, you get so much value out of understanding the questions and how, even how the materials that we're producing at a very basic level are being used, right? Do you go straight through the presentation? Do you pop in and out of slides? Do you use it as an afterthought and leave behind? There's all kinds of things, and that influences how we develop things and our messaging and our positioning and what it looks like and how useful it is. And so the more information that we have, the better chance we have of creating something really strong and powerful for the sales team and for the company. So,
well, and I suspect by you working with sales and sales working with marketing, there, like you talked about the frenemies, like it builds probably some empathy for each other's role, knowing that salespeople don't think about marketing every day, and sales reps or marketing's not thinking about their pipeline and what's going to get closed this week, this month, this quarter. So, what have you learned just kind of getting closer to sales, from them being maybe more empathetic to you, right? Or you being more empathetic to the sales team?
I think that there is, I was talking to somebody about this earlier, there is a common misconception on both sides of the aisle about how much work a pursuit really takes, right? So how much effort and emphasis is being put in by the other side. And that's where the natural frenemies come in, right? It's very easy to sit in the marketing seat and say, well, sales didn't do a good job chasing down the leads or, creating the conversations or building the case to bring the prospect in, right? And it's very easy on the other side for sales to be like, well, I didn't bring the prospect in because the marketing was not great, right? And it was the wrong type of person or the wrong type of materials. And so that's a really natural place for these two teams to sit. And I think as we've coordinated more closely, I think seeing the level of process that that is taken on by a sales function, right? So that the research that goes into creating the conversation, right? The understanding of the questions, the understanding of the person themselves and their own past and history and what their intent is. I mean, there's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes that I think is just not readily apparent when you're outside of the team or you're outside of the call. And so I think seeing that and seeing the foundational work, the groundwork that's laid, by the sales team as a part of the conversation is super instructive. And it gives you a little bit of empathy for the amount of time and effort they spend in pursuing each of these leads that we send their way. We send them in batches. Okay, here's 500 leads, go crazy. And then, the narrative can often be, well, we sent you 500, where are they, right? Or we sent, there's 500 opportunities just waiting for you, just go ahead and get them. And I think having a real appreciation for what it takes to really do it well. And then, the market is, in our case, sophisticated anyway and requiring more and more sophistication. And so each conversation requires that much effort and emphasis. And I think that can get lost when you're not.
And I expect being in your business building custom products, right? It's not like you're selling the same product over and over and over again, like software or something like that, where you ultimately have to bring each lead into and down the same general path. Now, it may not be at the same speed in the exact same way, but you ultimately get the product in the end. But in your case, you're selling a complex service where you're selling your capabilities and your differentiation, but the product that each of your customers is building is probably very unique, which probably adds a little bit more complexity to the sales cycle. Is that true?
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And we said when I joined the company, they said, oh, well, we build snowflakes, right? That's how we work for our clients. We build snowflakes. And our chief delivery officer, Dave Swatsky, who's a tremendous asset to 3Pillar, has said, all snowflakes are made of water. And so we have to figure out on the marketing side what the water is, and create that common theme so that we can demonstrate in all of our work that we have a consistent footprint in creating a certain kind of products in a certain kind of way. And we are differentiated. We use a product mindset. We have a different model called product development as a service. So there's a lot of stuff that we do that's different than our competitors. But I think it's the water piece that I think has been really a really sort of holy grail pursuit for marketing. How do you boil it down so that the customer feels like they're getting the customization that they need to achieve their goals, but you're able to explain in terms that they understand that you've got history and reps against the kind of work that they need. So it's a really complex situation.
Right. No, I can see that. So I want to go back to the idea of co-creating these campaigns with sales, because I think there's a lot. I suspect, like you said, marketers learned a lot about working with sales. I'm sure sales learns a lot just interacting with marketing about what it takes, and like, what are some of the things that they're asking of marketing, right? Because you're basically saying, hey, let's do this together. They're, obviously they want the good leads, right? But what are some of the things that they've been asking marketing as of late?
So it's interesting, and I'm thinking about a particular conversation that I had this year that was really fun with one of my sales colleagues as she was getting ready for a call. The typical ask of a marketer from a salesperson is a one-pager. I need a one-pager that explains either what we do or what this thing is or what have you. And so we have a big joke about one-pagers in our team. Because they never serve the purpose, right? First of all, we're a technology company. How lame is it to send an 8.5 by 11 PDF as a demonstration of how awesome your technology is? But it ends up, when you start to have the further conversation, you can actually realize what options are available within the marketing space to support the sales call. So in this conversation, we were talking about a particular lead. And doing some research together and helping my colleague prepare for her call. And we realized in the conversation that this guy interviews a lot, and we have our own podcast. It's called The Innovation Engine. And he had been a guest on several podcasts. And so we said, hey, why don't we invite him as a part of this larger sales conversation, introduction conversation, to be on our podcast? which ended up being a tremendous result. First of all, his episode is fantastic. And we got a lot of really great information, but we created a relationship and a value exchange that was so different than just sending in the one pager, right? Sort of the more perfunctory, well, you want to know what we do, here's what we do in 8.5 by 11, and then let's have a conversation there. So we were able to, in pursuit of knowing this company better and eventually wanting to work with them one day, we were able to create this value opportunity between marketing and sales that I think helped further the conversation and the trust between them. So it's interesting. And as we enter into those conversations, more of those like substantive, valuable support opportunities are available to us. And I think for my colleague, it was a aha moment as well, because she didn't really know that was an option available to her. Right. So it then became an interesting carrot for her as well.
That's really interesting because you're right. Like a podcast is one of those examples, like a webinar just kind of happens over there. It goes on the website and maybe people listen and you just wait for them to click the, call me or request a demo or whatever it may be on the call to action. But using the podcast as a avenue to warm a buyer, right? Build trust, bring them in, you get to know them. And then, I suspect that they end up becoming a customer.
I can't remember. They're somewhere in the funnel, but I think they, more importantly for us, because our sales cycle is so long, they became an advocate very quickly of 3Pillar and what we do. And I think that, we actually refer to those folks as our champions. And we have a lot of champions and referrals are a big part of our business. So it ends up, having another advocate in our corner is a really important thing for us.
Got it. No, absolutely. And how do you align KPIs between marketing and sales? Like, does marketing now have like revenue, like the whole revenue marketing or revenue marketer concept? Like, how has that infiltrated 3Pillar in terms of like?
And it's evolving and getting more and more mature. I think, at least in my view, my experience of being a marketer is always that marketing is a cost center, right? And so the closer you can align your marketing results to the sales and the revenue influence that it has, the better off you are in convincing your organization about the value of the team and the team's work. So we talk a lot about common metrics, and I think that's one thing that we were in pursuit of in the last couple of years. So it's not, marketing sends an email and the email gets a certain number of opens, but it's much more about what's the shared metric of success. And it can't be, again, our sales cycle is very long and our products are very complex. So it can't be revenue closed won, because you can go a year and a half without knowing how your stuff is working.
Right.
So
right.
we then find a leading indicator, right? So how do we think about what are the leading indicators that the marketing is the right kind of influence with the right kind of people and it's creating momentum in our funnel? So we actually are really looking at another stage of it next year. And, we operate under one commercial team, right? So sales and marketing have the same sort of owner in the same department. And I think that's gone a long way in helping us really understand and align towards each other's goals and figure out where the progress is. So I think we absolutely look at that, and I think it's essential for any marketer to make sure that they understand how they influence revenue and can create a metric that they can.
Right. And I know attribution's a really hard thing, because especially like there's probably a bunch of places and touch points where market the website, it could be an email campaign, it could be an ad somewhere, and it's it could be a word of mouth, it could be a referral from a podcast to check this out. Like you just can't track everything that marketing touches, and usually it's the last touch that gets the attribution, whether it's a Google ad or some other thing. So it's a really hairy problem. I certainly read a lot about how people are trying to get people to think marketing less about every dollar has to be attributed to ROI, because you can't. Right? Because if someone just tells a friend, that can't be tracked, and they come in and request a demo or click an ad, and so like how do you think about demonstrating or telling the value of marketing when it's near impossible to track every touch point a buyer has with a marketing thing through that buying journey?
Yeah, I mean, it is really hard, particularly when you work in an organization whose sale is so complex, right? It's a lot easier to show influence when you're just selling a phone or a pen or whatever. So I think we think about it in a couple different ways. One, we do a lot of work on the brand side, which is really not quantifiable, right? How
Yes.
much brand influence do you have? What does that metric look like? So we try to find a lot of ways, either through moving in through like press hits and thought leadership and locations of where our content is featured and our people are featured, stages and stuff like that. So we do have a more qualitative sort of approach there in terms of understanding who's talking about us and how often we're featured, and we can look at some things like that. And the brand piece is really hard to measure, but it's also really important, particularly in a market like ours, which is super fragmented, right? We don't have a consistent set of competitors. We go up against all different kinds of people from all different kinds of agencies and services, and so it's really important to be building that brand recognition. So we do have some measurements, like I said, they're more qualitative. And then, on the lead generation side, we have certain metrics, like I think marketing influence across new clients and new engagements, things like that. But we also start to look at other like engagement factors, right? Other factors of success. So, how many people from an organization are engaging with our content at a given time? And what does that mean? Is that sending us a signal that something's happening, that they've heard about us or that we've been in conversation? And so we look at things like that as well to help showcase the influence and try to tell a global picture, so that we're not, it can be often a challenge to avoid the single metric, right, of success, right? Either revenue plus one, or it's number of MQLs, and if it's MQL or die. And I think that what we found is that it's a much more complex picture than that, and so you can't boil it down to a single metric, but you do have to figure out what are the key things that you're following, and make sure that you're making the right inroads and setting your goals along those metrics and showcasing.
And that's my last question on this rule here. So like, how far do you, or is sales asking for support into the sales funnel, right? So it starts, at the very top of the marketing funnel, goes into the sales funnel, the top of the sales funnel, and then it goes down through, like, how far does sales want you to get involved, or how far do you want to get involved, down to like, when they sign the contract?
We can remain involved, all the way through from start to finish. And I think those are some of the more fun campaigns for us to work on, or pursuits for us to work on, because we end up with that collaboration starts at the very beginning and goes all the way through. We certainly are engaged much more at the top of the funnel in the activities. A lot of times for us, by the time you get to a certain stage of opportunity, it's a lot of legal nitty gritty and contracting and timing and stuff like that.
Right.
That we don't have to be involved in blessedly. I'm not a lawyer for a reason. So I think that stuff is a little bit we don't tend to get as influenced that way. But the thing that we do is, as I talked about earlier, we have this champions network, and that is current clients, former employees, and so a big part of our responsibility as marketers in my company is to make sure that not only do we maintain a relationship with those people, but we do that from the start. So there's a lot of effort that once you get through the funnel and the opportunity's done, right, and you're moving into delivery, that doesn't end the relationship with marketing. And so how do we keep that relationship alive and showcase the work that we're doing, right? Because there's inside sales opportunities, right? We're only doing one kind of work for you, but we can do tons of different kind of work. Do you know that? So, I prefer to believe that our role is always evolving and always important, no matter the stage of the conversation.
Well, and I think that's an important point, because I think marketing is generally thought of as new business acquisition, but there's also a lot of internal communication and marketing that has to happen about just educating people on things are happening across the company. I know you guys have been very active, acquiring companies, bringing on new board members and new leaders. And then, like you said, just touching existing customers, which oftentimes is perceived to be overlooked because they're already in the bag, right? So like why that's like sales and account management or things of that nature. So I can imagine just,
you know, you can't drop them out of the conversation. You got to keep them involved.
yes. Well, you mentioned you had a couple revenue rules, so I think that was a fantastic one. I mean, you can't ever, I mean, the co-creation, I'm going to use that a lot. So that's really good. What's the second revenue rule you have?
So, you know, it's interesting because you just talked about, you know, we've been growing a ton and acquiring new teams, and I think this that has been a really instructive experience, at least for us. And so, I think another revenue rule is focusing on the revenue as your North Star as you integrate these new teams into your company, right? So, how do you build a shared vision of what success looks like? And you have to build a shared vision of what success looks like across the teams and build a path forward for them to come together. And I think that's been unique to our experience, but that goaling and that vision setting is so important as we, you know, in our own team, right, between sales and marketing, it's important for everyone to understand that, but particularly it's important as you bring on new players and new capability sets right into the organization, which we're finding right now. It's having that goal and that vision and making it crystal clear and unassailable is essential to success and to moving quickly and to growing and to doing all of those great things.
Well, take us through that, because I mean, I've never gone through that myself. I've at least in the you know, assimilating and integrating a new company into the fold. So like, I guess it starts with, you know, 3Pillar CEO's leadership, right? David DeWolf, like it starts there, right? A shared vision for this new, larger organization. And then how does that manifest itself down into like what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So David has a very strong perspective and point of view, as CEOs do, and you know, he built this company from the ground up, and so he is very, you know, very passionate about our product mindset and the work that we do and the culture of the company, and all of those feed into our differentiator, right? You know, we build these super high performing teams, and so you know, even in the pursuit of integrating companies, we need to make sure that there's enough of the cultural and goal setting DNA in there in that acquired company so that it doesn't become oil and water and you actually get to merge. But where it comes down, you know, the clearer the vision is from him, the easier it is for us to figure out what our piece parts are and how to make that vision come to life, right? So from the marketing side, you know, we're thinking about growth, right? We build these high performing teams that deliver digital product development services in this information industry. Well, where's the next path, right? Like that vision comes from him, but it's up to marketing to figure out how to go and message to that path and what are the right words, who are the right people,
Right.
how are we talking to them, how do you build momentum in an industry you've never talked to before, you know, if you're adding a new portfolio. But that global vision is really important. One of the things that I think we've started focusing on now is the connective tissue between the global macro vision of growth and you know, aspirations of you know, the next stage or whatever that is, that the connective tissue between that and the delivery of the asset, right? So how do we think about what's in the middle in terms of that vision, right? What are the incremental steps to making that vision come to pass? So it's not just we're going to increase our revenue by X numbers, or we're going to, you know, have better high functioning teams or build a more, you know, solid organization somehow. But what does that mean for our team? What does that mean for marketing? What does that mean for sales? And again, then you extract the collective goal there and then use that as the North Star, building that alignment and moving it through. And what's really interesting is when you're adding in other companies, yes, there's some similarities in the DNA, but they also have totally different ideas. And so you have to be as flexible in that aperture so that it's not so hard that you can't scoop up all the goodness that that company or that team brings to the table. So it's a really delicate balance, but if done well, and you know, we're trying very hard to do it well, I think it can make the team far more powerful and you know, the results far more powerful.
Right, because I mean, anytime you're bringing two organizations together, you're having different skills and capabilities, experiences, what's worked well, systems, technologies, and you know, you got to make all of that fit So are you in this most recent acquisition? Are they fully integrating? Is it going to be operating as this, like a brand of 3Pillar, or is it all just kind of like coming in and fully integrating? And what does that look like when it comes to marketing?
So we're eventually we will all be one uniform brand, which is a really exciting marketing challenge. And we just acquired 2 companies, and so that we are moving towards that. But the recipe now is figuring out how do we capture all the good and bring it into the 3Pillar home without sacrificing any of it along the way, right? So they bring different expertise, different strategies, different things that have worked for them, different content. I mean, all kinds of different things. And so right now, what we're looking at is how do we understand what's the best things to adopt and build in, and how do we do that in a way that magnifies and improves the brand and builds it up instead of just breaking it apart or somehow compromising one over the other. So it's a very delicate process, but it's super exciting.
Yeah, I can imagine just any integration, just the technology alone, right? Just getting all the systems to work, or you may have some duplicative systems, CRMs, marketing automation, right?
Or
All that stuff.
yeah, it says using Pardot versus Marketo versus HubSpot, and they all function and look different, but have the same goal. And so yeah, there's a lot of technical gobbledygook that ends up clouding it. But I think this vision statement, right? The understanding where we're headed and how to get there, it makes it so much easier to follow a path and make decisions. Because I think ultimately, as leaders in an organization, we have to understand the consequences of the decision one way or the other and be able to evaluate those to figure out the path to go. And so the clearer your vision is, the easier it is to make those decisions comfortably and move quicker.
And how, this is just kind of a COVID question, how has working remotely played into kind of the onboarding of these new companies and the team, and marketing, right? Like it's just, you can't be at the whiteboard together, or, a lot of that creativity stuff that marketing does so well, it's got to be harder, over Zoom calls.
It is really hard over Zoom calls. It's funny, some of our new teammates in different areas, like we probably would have met them the same way, COVID or no, right? Because these teams that we're working with now, they're in Arizona and Costa Rica and all over the place. So that there's some of it that would have been the same, but I think the ability to get together and whiteboard and, at least for me personally, I find that it's the goofy side of the conversation when you start to joke around with your colleagues that some of the real gems come out of that. And it's really hard to do that when you're staring at a monitor, right? And I don't have a whiteboard at my house, and my colleagues don't have a whiteboard either. So there are certain things we've tried, team building exercises over Zoom, but there's a lot of fatigue with staring at a computer, and it just doesn't feel so creative. And I think that's one of the joys that at least I find in marketing is that ability to create and build and try new things. And so it has been limiting, and in some ways, and I think forced us to really try to get creative on how to think virtually. So we actually do things like, we have an assignment every week in our weekly marketing team meeting where everybody's in charge of bringing back at least 1 or 2 new ideas that they saw in the market that we want to try or replicate, thought was cool, and to talk about why. And sometimes it's somebody, you got send a gift through whatever system and you show them what it looks like and what it meant, or sometimes it's really interesting advertising or video work, content. And so we try to do things like that to help keep that creativity up, but it is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, no, I bet. Well, I know how creative your team has been. I know we have the opportunity to work together with the product mindset diagnostic, and I'm going to put a couple of things in the show notes. One being the Innovation Engine podcast, so make sure I get the link to that. I want to include that. Just talk a little bit about why you guys wanted to build, a kind of an interactive assessment, which is our language. It's built around your product mindset, which you talk about. There was a book written about it, but just kind of how did you come to that place?
Yeah, so the product mindset, is the frame that we use to approach all of our product development engagements, right? And it really it helps guide our teams, and has a couple core principles, right? It's excelling at change, it's minimizing time to value, and solving for need. And really, how do you take those three sort of principles and use that to help guide the team towards success? So we employ it all the time. And there's, what we thought with the assessment is, there's sort of a product mindset continuum. You could be great at solving for need, but not great at excelling at change. And so where does that limitation come to pass for your team, and what does it look like? And so we wanted to create a way and to help look at, where the person that we're talking to is in that continuum. What are things that they are experiencing? How do we identify those experiences and help give them some tools to move forward? And so it helps in a couple ways, right? It helps us in a sales conversation, obviously, because you have a frame to talk about in your next conversation. But it also is a valuable offering, right? If you are leading a product organization and you feel alone and you're stuck, right? How do you unlock that situation and create a path forward? And if we can use a tool like a diagnostic that can help showcase areas that you can make changes and small tweaks and improve immediately, it really goes a long way to showcasing the value of 3Pillar, the value of our product mindset, and to create that relationship. And so we've seen a really great success with it, and are looking forward to seeing it continue to build relationships for us.
Yeah, and I know how hard software development is, just, having been in it a bunch of times. I've taken your product mindset diagnostic. I learned something every time, because again, like you said, building software is hard. A lot of people don't know all that goes into, it's a lot of inputs and a lot of outputs, and boy, there's a lot of opinions and requirements and science and art that kind of go into that, and so there's a lot of opportunities for success and challenges. So like just being able to showcase or highlight for clients where they are through your framework, the product mindset, I think was genius, and super valuable. I personally, and a lot of the assessments we build, I don't know the domain, but this was one that could land pretty quickly with me, just given the software that we build. So I'm still using that, so just so you know. Well, thank you, Margaret. I want to just turn a little bit to just how you got into marketing. What career aspirations do you have? Just love to hear a little bit about the journey of your career.
Sure. It's funny. I joke that my career really only makes sense if you look backwards. I can tell you how I got to each place, but it doesn't all necessarily sequence normally. But I have a background. I started in marketing. I graduated obviously with a degree in international studies and Spanish, and I was going to be an international development superstar, and that never came to pass. And after dabbling in that for a little bit, I ended up working at a PR agency, and that turned me on to this world of marketing and public relations and communications. So I spent a long time in the agency world, and got to work for some amazing brands, ending my last gig doing marketing and crisis and media relations for McDonald's, the local cooperatives in Maryland and Virginia, which was a tremendous amount of fun. And I know an absurd amount about McDonald's, and I there all the time, and I still love McDonald's, and I loved working for that company, and I got to go to Hamburger University, which was amazing.
Well, they've had some of their own controversies here as of late, just watching the news. So I'm sure they're hiring your old firm potentially.
Yes, I mean, it's funny, like when you think about crisis communications and you think about the world of McDonald's, I attended everything from, some person put their car in drive instead of park and drove into the store, and what does that look like, or fires and things like that, all kinds of things that you don't even think about. So it definitely kept me on my toes. It was a great experience. And then I went to the client side, and I worked in-house, building marketing campaigns and content marketing campaigns for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And then, fell in love with the startup world, the technology world when I was there, created a lot of relationships there, and moved into working for 1776, which is a local incubator here in DC, and was with them for a while. And then through them, I met 3Pillar and started talking to the leaders of 3Pillar about the work that they were doing, and really, enjoyed the conversations I had with the leadership, and really trusted that they were doing tremendous things, and I wanted to be on the bus. So I got to come over and do that. So it definitely feels a little bit, as I describe it, as like each experience was a snowflake experience, but the water was the marketing and the
Right.
and the PR work, and being able to apply it in so many different ways and so many different kinds of organizations has really stood me in great stead.
And I
So,
suspect your time at 3Pillar can probably be considered like several different jobs in and of itself, right? Just given the stage of growth that you've been along to see and contribute to.
oh, 100%. And it's a little bit harkening back to my agency days, because when you're in a PR agency or a marketing agency, you have a bunch of different clients. So you have to be able to hang up the phone with your United Nations Foundation client and then pick up the next call, and it's the Office of Champagne USA, and you have to be able to pivot quickly, right? And we work off portfolios in our company, right? We work in retail and media and information services, and they're all different kinds of organizations that fall in those categories, and they have different leaders and different needs. And so that ability to pivot that you get in the agency has really stood me in great stead at 3Pillar, being able to learn the different motivations of each of our portfolios and the folks in them. So it definitely requires a lot of pivoting and change. And as we grow as an organization, more capabilities, as we build in more organizations, we're scaling our team, we're scaling our operations, and so there's a lot of tremendous opportunity that is super exciting in the marketing world at 3Pillar.
Yeah, I see you guys popping up all over my LinkedIn feed just with new announcements. Just I think in the last 60 days alone, as new board members, new executives, new acquisitions. So you certainly have your hands full. But I just want to thank you so much, Margaret, for coming on the Revenue Hustle. This has been a delightful conversation. I really love the rules that you put forth today. And so I hope we can do this again down the road, as who knows, 3Pillar will be twice the size, and you'll be going to Costa Rica to meet with your team in person. You should definitely be pushing for that trip.
Absolutely, I'm trying. As soon as they open those borders, I am there for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. My pleasure. All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to The Revenue Hustle. This episode has been brought to you by 9 Lenses. Close more deals with interactive assessments. Check them out at 9lenses.com. See you next time.